Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks so much for joining me. It's great to be with you here on Tuesday. Thank you for being a patron. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Sharon Newman, who just rejoined. We really appreciate her rejoining. Today, not going to take a long time just because I did a lot. You've got a lot to listen to, and I don't want to overwhelm you. That's one of the things that I've learned. Back in the day, pre-COVID, if you were doing a podcast, the ironclad rule was that the more content that you did, got to push my mic up. I just realized, you ever sit there and realize your posture is terrible and you need to not have a hunchback when you're 50? So anyways, you used to be able to put out more content, the better. If you remember, Tom Wood started doing a daily show, and that's what cemented his position for a brief time as the most popular libertarian podcast. And then somewhere after COVID, with so much content exploding, what I realized was more content is not always better, because people have so many more choices now that if they realize, I haven't listened to the last 5 of this, I'm just going to delete it off my phone. So you got to be careful not to give too. But that's why I'm doing this for the patrons, because I feel like if you guys are willing to financially support this show, you probably want to hear from me more. Those other people on the main feed, they not as much, I don't think. But today we're going to talk about Mark Zuckerberg's letter to Jim Jordan and the Committee on the Judiciary, talking about censorship. So way back in, what was it? Late 22? Let me see when Leslie Corbley was on to talk about this. December 14th, 2022. We had the blurry lines between government and big tech censorship with Leslie Corbley, my good friend and soon-to-be recurring guest here on the show. And we talked about the concept of jawboning. And so the definition of jawboning, I just deleted it as I was going away from it. So jawboning is essentially when people use influence to pressure people to do things, but not in an official capacity. So Oxford says the attempt to persuade or pressure by force of one's position of authority. And what we talked with Leslie about back in 2022 was a lawsuit that revealed the blurred lines between social media and government, and how the government during COVID was impacting people's civil liberties. We'll throw that in there if you want to go back and listen to that and see how you were informed 2 years before this was released. But let me read from CNBC this account of what Mark Zuckerberg is saying now. A weird transition with this guy, because July 4th, this was a meme. So if you saw the meme of him with a chain and the beard, that was AI. But Zuckerberg seems to be wanting to get in on he's trying to be Dave Portnoy, drinking beer while surfing, and now admitting that he censored people during COVID-19. He had a choice, and he made the wrong choice, and now he's sorry, and he wants you to know it. But this is a thing that Mark Zuckerberg does all the time. He does the wrong thing, and then when he gets caught, he goes, "Oh, sorry, we'll do better." And then time goes by, and then he doesn't do better. Do you remember way back in, 2014, 15? I know we talked about it on We Are Libertarians, but Glenn Beck going to the White House, or going to Facebook, because if you remember, Facebook had on the right side these curated news articles, and they were never putting conservative news into that. It was always just sort of mainstream news. And Zuckerberg swore up and down to Glenn Beck and The Blaze that he would start doing better. He'd put in the Daily Caller and right-leaning sources and have balance. Yeah, how'd that work out for us? Lost my Facebook group. Now that the election is around the corner, I've been banned on Instagram for 3 days. I think twice now. So I keep getting zucked every election cycle for a meme I posted of Hunter Biden holding balloons in the air, calling him a Chinese spy balloon. I deleted it out of the group that they took, and they still banned me on it. So no balance has been restored. But Mark Zuckerberg always does this, and don't fall for it, because he's going to keep doing the same thing. But we always have to keep in mind the principle of don't ever forget who the greater censor is. Yes, social media companies censor and try to reduce the amount of content they think is bad. Conspiratorial content, political content. We tried to run an ad for a podcast that I produced called Leaders and Legends where we interviewed Mike Pence, and they won't approve the ad because it's Mike Pence. This is political. You can't run it. Well, we didn't talk really politics in it. It was more of a biographical interview and, what was Jan 6 like for you and that sort of thing. But they're saying it's not acceptable for their ads, right? So they definitely do it. There's no doubt about it. But they're the lesser censor. Why? Because you can just stop using Facebook. If you don't like YouTube and get censored on it like we have, you go over to Rumble. And like Austin Peterson has made a new career out of Rumble, right? So you can have creative destruction where when somebody is a bad actor in the marketplace, move over to a competitor. So if they're censoring you, you can move on. You can maybe X will get bought by Elon Musk and you can say what you want there. You don't have that freedom with the government. The government is the greater censor because the government has monopolized violence. They have monopolized force. And you have to do what they say or you'll end up in prison or bankrupt. That's the nature of government. So we can never look at, let's destroy Section 230 to hurt these social media companies. Oh, really? You want to use the power of government to make the internet worse because you're mad at a company you can destroy by creating a better competitor? That never has made any sense to me. So Mark Zuckerberg from CNBC, this article is titled, Mark Zuckerberg says White House pressured Meta to censor COVID-19 content. The Biden administration pressured Facebook parent Meta to censor content related to COVID-19, and the social media giant CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, alleged, adding that he regrets some of the decisions taken in relation to the U.S. government's requests. We'll read a little bit of this letter. The letter was posted on the committee's Facebook page, the House Judiciary Committee, and on X. CNBC and Meta have both confirmed that this letter is accurate. So let's read the letter. Let's go through the letter and see what they have to say. There's a lot of talk right now about how the U.S. government interacts with companies like Meta, and I want to be clear about our position. Our platforms are for everyone. We're about promoting speech and helping people connect in a safe and secure way. As part of this, we regularly hear from governments around the world and other various concerns around public discourse and public safety. In 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire. Yeah. Donald Trump never said to inject bleach in his arm. Okay? He didn't tell people to go do that, by the way. And there were a lot of Clorox memes. Well, those all got taken down because Donald Trump told people to inject bleach, and we gotta, this bleach thing still goes on. It drives me crazy. What I cannot stand is people lying. I hate lying. I hate when people lie. Tim Walz, huge liar. Kamala, don't get me started, okay? He the way the press sticks up for lying after 10 years of rightly calling Donald Trump a huge liar, they completely ignore the lies of Harris and Walz, and it drives me crazy. They had an article this weekend. Harris is actually from Berkeley, not Oakland, but Berkeley understands. And isn't this just so funny that she's lying? Oh, and the people of Berkeley are okay with it because she doesn't want to be associated with the most leftist town in the country. Tim Walz, it's fine. Republicans are digging up lies about Tim Walz, like when he said that he won an award for being the most outstanding young Nebraskan from the Chamber of Commerce, and it wasn't the Chamber of Commerce. I think it was the JCs, which is like a junior. So, not. But the thing about Walz is that he is a lot like Donald Trump. He's just speaking off the cuff, man. He's just saying what people think. The difference is Donald Trump doesn't accept guardrails. Tim Walz does. But if Tim Walz didn't accept guardrails, he'd be as big of a liar as Donald Trump. So yeah, they censored things like my cool bleach memes that were really funny. Back to the letter, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down. Thank you for the personal responsibility, Mark. And we own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I don't buy that they did it only because of pressure. One of the lasting effects of the COVID era is the current thing. Kamala Harris is so important and a generational icon now, when 3 months ago nobody liked her because she's just the current thing, right? Let's put out our Ukraine flags. Right? We took down this flag and put up another one. So I think they would have gone along with it. I don't buy that that we only did this because of government pressure. I believe the government pressure was wrong, says Zuckerberg, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. Like I said to our teams at the time, I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to pressure from any administration in either direction, and we're ready to push back if something like this happens again. Boy, I'd love to see it, because you never do. You never change. You do exactly what you've always done. In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation around the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election, the laptop. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family, we sent that story to fact-checkers for review and temporarily demoted it while waiting for a reply. It's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation, and in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. We've changed our policies and processes to make sure this doesn't happen again. For instance, we are no longer temporarily demoting things in the U.S. while waiting for fact-checkers. Where's the rest of the letter? Okay. Apart from content moderation, I want to address the contributions I made during the last presidential election to support electoral infrastructure. The idea here was to make sure local election jurisdictions across the country had the resources they need to help people vote safely during a global pandemic. I made those contributions through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. They were designed to be nonpartisan, spread across rural, urban, and suburban communities. Still, despite the analysis I've seen showing otherwise, I know that some people believe this work benefited one party over the other. My goal is to be neutral and not play a role one way or the other, or to even appear to be playing a role. So I don't plan on making a similar contribution this cycle. I don't know the background on that donation story. I apologize, but a noble goal. So, yeah, totally confirming what we all knew. I got to send this to Reinhold right now. Hey, that laptop thing you were talking about the other day, Zuckerberg says you're wrong. This is going to cause a fight in the group chat. I love it. Love it. I'm also going to put in the show notes a Cato Institute article from back in 2022, a policy analysis, jawboning against speech, how government bullying shapes the rules of social media. Government officials use informal pressure, bullying, threatening, and cajoling to sway the decisions of private platforms and limit the production of disfavored speech. The use of this informal pressure, known as jawboning, is growing. So it's also an explanation of what's going on. All right, let me get here in the group chat. You all join me. Let's type this out. Dennis, Mark Z says the laptop was real and he should not have censored it. What? All caps. What say you? Go follow Riley there. Reinhold is Dennis, by the way. I won't say that on the regular show, but that's what I call him. So we'll see here. And then in the other group chat, we've been arguing about abortion all morning. So I don't know. Do you guys do that? Leave a comment. You have people in your group chat that you love to inflame. I always like, Dennis is definitely, like my bias is towards the Republican Party and his bias is towards the Democratic Party, whether he wants to admit that or not. So, and he tends to fall down on the side of the official story. So we always just love ribbing him. And he takes it well, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, the reality that these tech companies were pushed to censor COVID information is, and even jokes, is not surprising. And I think this kind of, I think it is telling that he mentioned jokes in this and memes, because that's the way that most people actually consume information. Like Kamala Harris isn't popular because of the mainstream media, in my opinion. Like this shift from being unpopular to popular in a month or two is really about the general environment of information in which we all stream. So not a lot of people are like sitting down reading the articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post and watching Norah O'Donnell over on CBS or whoever's doing the 6:30 p.m. news now. It is that is like the platform on which we all stand, right? Like talk radio and conservative press loves to decry the mainstream media, including me, but that's really where we get all of our news. Have you ever listened to a talk radio show? It's nothing but New York Times articles and they're disagreeing with it, like I just did, right? If you listen to Ben Shapiro and he does a story every 3 minutes because he's perfectly built his show for modern radio and the information environment, which is every 3 minutes you change your subject, he is only using mainstream sources for the most part, right? That is, like if you watch a lot of right-wing press, they all use mainstream outlets because on-the-ground reporting is really expensive to do and hard to do, and fewer places are able to do it. WCBS just closed down, and I'll play the end of this here for you. But anyways, people generate their memes from all of the mainstream press, which is why I think so many people get mad about the mainstream press. But the way that most people actually consume their information is jokes, specifically jokes about the other side. You know, Tim Walz and his horse fetish. I'm not going to explain that one. Or J.D. Vance and his couch. You know, J.D. Vance and his donut shop. You didn't see that on CNBC. You saw that on Twitter, on Instagram. You saw that on TikTok, right? That's where most people are getting their information, which is really threatening to people in power because they can't control the flow of information. They can't tell you that, they want to be able to tell you that that bleach joke is out of line, even though you, as a thinking person, know you should not inject bleach into your arm. But it is the typical paternalistic view that government has of you, especially Democrats, that we know better than you, we have all of the facts, we never get it wrong, we're really just looking out for you, and so we need to tell you what to do and force you to do it. And when you start thinking that we don't have the power to do that, it makes us uncomfortable. We have to start doing something about it. Now, we can't pass laws because it'll get caught. We'll get it'll get tossed out in court, and the press will get mad because they don't want to be controlled. So they start gently pressuring the real source of information. They can't go to the New York Times and pressure them. They'll get a lawsuit and win. But there's no freedom of speech laws technically where the Biden administration can call up and say, hey, this Biden laptop story is fake. Take that down. Get it fact-checked. And Zuckerberg's going to do it because he doesn't want to get fined and sued into oblivion by the Justice Department or investigated by the House Democrats. He's got shareholders and investors who are largely Democrats, and he's got to answer to them. The government doesn't have to answer to anyone. They get to do whatever they want to do to you within reason, right? But like back in 2009 at the Borders bookstore libertarian meetups, like vaccine mandates were a theoretical what if. Nobody would ever try that. And now here we are in my lifetime, we've tried that. And the only way that ever was going to, where you were ever going to get information that maybe the government doesn't have a right to force you to take a vaccine, that you should or should not take a vaccine, that's your choice. But the government can't force you to take that vaccine. You don't, like, you have to vaccinate your kids to send them to a public school, but you could just homeschool and never vaccinate them. You get that choice, right? Don't use the public services and protect your conscience, or do vaccinate them and send them to public school. That's a trade-off. That's a decision you have to make. Nobody's forcing your kid to do it. You could, and then some libertarians would quibble like, hey, why should we force? And that there are laws now that across the country are saying that you can't force kids to be vaccinated to go to public schools. It's unfair and unequal. And I'm willing to entertain that argument for sure. But when the Biden administration comes out and says every American needs to be vaccinated and companies fall lockstep in with CDC guidance because everybody's scared, that's just a bridge too far. And you remember that period, it is where the CDC, companies just default to the CDC and their guidance, right? Which companies should not have done. They should have questioned the morality of their decision. Should I force my employees to do this? Now, the opposite argument is we have a duty to keep our employees safe, and this vaccine is going to cut the rates of transmission, which was not true. So we ought to do that. But anybody with a brain who was paying attention at that time knew that the vaccine wasn't going to stop transmission. It lessened your percentage of chance of dying, but it also had a lot of other complications, and it was a brand new therapeutic, right? But the Biden administration made the decision that we're going to use the CDC and we're going to use our power to pressure these social media companies to do what we want them to do. Eventually, in the courts, a lot of that got stopped, which was the point, by the way. But all administrations do this now. They put forward some executive action that they know is going to get struck down in the courts, and then they can just say, yeah, we tried, but, you know, those Republican appointees, man, aren't they horrible? Even though they knew the policy, they just know the effect is that the initial reporting is going to be huge, and then the follow-up's going to be lessened. So yeah, so that's why they went and pressured them. They wanted to make sure. I'm rambling at this point. All right, so back to consumption of the news. I just ranted about vaccines and stuff like that. So, the consumer, the news consumer has changed, right? And the thing that is valuable is on the ground reporting. And you're starting to see that really be backed by billionaires. So ProPublica is reporting on the Supreme Court, which is backed by a liberal Democratic donor who basically said, go investigate the conservative members of the Supreme Court. And then that very valuable on-the-ground reporting, going through documents, talking to people, finding where the bodies are buried, is then used by other outlets. This is the chain of information. You know, you have one person who does the work, and then blog mills amplify that. In New York, then when the blog mills amplify it, then the mainstream papers pick it up, which is then where TV and radio and other news outlets and other blog mills get their information, because now that the New York Times has said it, then it's true. And then it gets picked up by podcasts and TikTok stars and everybody else, and then it just sort of becomes fact, right? But that initial on-the-ground reporting is incredibly important. Very hard to do. But the thing that actually has the power in that chain is the first person that brings the attention to light and the people that amplify it. And then the second is the people that truly amplify it, which are social media influencers, meme pages, And let's be honest, that's where you get a lot of your information. It's independent, normal people like me who are media literate, trying to figure out what's true. But I don't work for a mainstream news outlet. I work for a major radio show, but we tell dick jokes. Like, we're not out there trying to tell you what to think, right? I'm just a guy who has 20 years of experience in media, watching it, and in politics, and trying to understand the news and help you to understand it. And that's different than, a researcher or a reporter for the New York Times that spends 7 hours a day looking over documents, right? It's the different, like a historian actually reads the cursive of documents in the Library of Congress, and then a history TikToker or podcaster reads their work, right? But it's usually the history TikToker that makes that work popular, not the work itself. And so the challenge in media and the media landscape is it's too expensive, and has always been expensive to do on-the-ground reporting, so there's less of that. But then what's disappearing are outlets like WCBS. WCBS Radio New York has been on for 70 years, a little below, a little more, 70-ish years. And they're one of these radio stations that don't do like syndicated talk. They give you headlines, news, traffic, weather. Like 1010 Winds is a competitor of theirs. On the 10s, you're going to get, every 10 minutes, you get a cycle, a wheel, as we call it in radio, of news, traffic, weather. And you get headlines, and you can tune in and you get informed. And most of your major cities, like Indianapolis has WIBC, where they've transitioned from that news wheel more towards more opinionated talk. I talked about Marvin Olasky in World Magazine, right? If it's a business decision for news outlets to go from on-the-ground reporting or news wheels to opinion, because opinion is cheap. You just need to pay. If you want a newsroom in New York City, you've got to have 40 people working in your newsroom. You've got to have reporters. You've got to have presenters. You've got to have editors. You've got to have a staff that runs the websites, etc. If you switch to opinion talk, you've got to have one guy and his producer and a traffic and news guy. Like 3 or 4 people instead of 20 to 40. So it's just like, what do you need WCBS radio for? What do you need a lot of these mid-tier outlets that used to be heritage, on-the-ground reporting, breaking news type things? Like, I don't need WCBS radio to tune in. I can go on my phone. Right? So it's just sort of, I don't need an outlet that just gives me the headlines. I need you to interpret the headlines for me. I need you to help guide me to be a better news consumer and make informed decisions and help me weed through the jungle of content, right? And a WCBS was more of a content curator of news by the end than it was actually like a reportage outlet, like it was back in the 70s. But I think in the sign-off, the fella here had a good point about things. So let's listen in as he signs off on WCBS Radio.
Thons, for example. You held us to a high standard and let us know when we didn't hit the mark. All of us here knew that our audience is engaged and smart, and we knew to treat our audience with the respect that a well-informed, well-educated news consumer deserves. That's right, deserves. Our news desert is getting bigger and drier. And just like we should get a second medical opinion, we need to seek out more and more varied news sources that we trust, because getting your information without the bias and brainwashing in one place has given way to a fight to stay informed. With each closing newspaper, radio newsroom, TV newsroom, magazine, and now even digital news operations, the country we love is diminished. So as we leave the news ecosystem after 57 years of all news and 100 years of service on New York radio, we implore you to find that next trusted source. Use it, support it, in word and deed. It is the most patriotic thing you can do, and the most satisfying. To paraphrase a CBS News legend, good night and good luck.
Now, he then goes on to talk about the power of radio, which I have a very similar story, which I told you about in the last week. But I love this.
You will ask, why does this...
Then I'm not going to break in. I'm going to let it play out. But they do something brilliant in their sign-off. They have this great monologue after 57 years of service and helping you understand the news and navigate the news desert landscape. Then it goes to silence, and then they break into sports talk, which is being flipped to. And it's the worst show you've ever heard. It underscored their point that he just made so well. So listen to this.
Radio station means so much. Why is the reaction the way it is? And I really can't speak for others. I can speak for myself. My parents split when I was 11. We split Christmas, and when I was at Dad's house, he gave me a clock. And this one had a beam at the top that shined the time onto the ceiling. I wanted to make sure it was set correctly, so I went to the station I heard in the back of the car, WCBS, to make sure the time was exactly right. And I listened and listened, and before long, I became hooked as a 12, 13-year-old. When I was 14, my dad drove me to the radio station in New York City during morning rush hour traffic. And he introduced me to the place I'm now signing off in 2024. Ray Martell, here's your last request. Chris Olivero, Ben Meverek, Ivan Lee, our bosses pushed for and got the authority to let us have our goodbyes, to have a last show. That's something very rare. I thank them for that. And I thank my dad for driving me into New York City in 1978. Parents, you never know what impact these random acts of love and attention may have on your children. I'm Wayne Cabot, and for the final time, this is WCBS, New York.
Every single, time we have a show. So all 4 hours of this show, commercial free, will be available wherever you do get your podcasts. We talked about why the Steelers at quarterback, no matter who they start, are screwed. We've talked about so far as well the biggest, boldest takes that will come true here in 2024. It's been a fun show so far. Hick at Night podcast, Night spelled N-I-T-E. That is where you are.
All right, so goodbye, WCBS Radio, helping us navigate the information desert. Hello, Night Sports Talk podcast guy. All right. And I don't know, and I know I'm probably a contributor to this, but it's just there's so much noise. And bummer to see WCBS go, but they're dead on. We need people to help curate and figure out what is, and that's what I aspire to do here, is to help you figure out what's true, what's going on, and what's right and what's wrong. And thank you all for, as he said, holding me accountable too. That's one reason I love this audience, is you all interact with me, let me know. I got a note yesterday from someone who said, look, if Shane Hazel is saying racist stuff on Twitter, it doesn't mean he's a good guy. Because I think I said, Hazel's a good guy, this is confusing, or something along those lines. He's like, he's not a good guy, and you shouldn't say that. And that's a fair point. Like, if you are willing to be anti-Semitic and racist and say these horrible things on Twitter, then that's probably who you are. And just because you're nice to me when we meet personally, your beliefs, when given power, will be destructive to human lives. And that makes you not a good person. So I love that you all hold me accountable. Thank you so much for joining me here on the show. I've got to go to a meeting at work and get my day started, and then go host an episode. I host a podcast called Big Hearted Indie, which I really enjoy doing, and I think you'll get a lot out of. So check that out. We're recording an episode today, and thank you all for joining me here and supporting us on Patreon. Love you guys, and I will see you again tomorrow. And I keep forgetting to hit my outro music as I'm doing the outro, but I'll get the hang of it, right? We just got to keep practicing. Didn't do a show yesterday, just too busy. I don't know that I'll be able to get one in on Mondays. That is my busiest day of the week. I've got a lot of production due that day. just sun up to sundown, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. yesterday. And yeah, that's the life of a dad with 2 kids under 5 and full-time job and full-time business and a full-time podcast habit. So I apologize, but again, there's a lot over the weekend. So you got a lot to listen to. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.